Thanks everybody for coming to the SIG OpenStack deep dive. Typically in the past, the way that we've run two sessions. The first one has been kind of an intro to the working group. That was 2 days ago, and that was more of a formal presentation of the work that we've done and the work that we're planning on doing, and just kind of an introduction for folks who may not have have worked with SIG OpenStack before. For the deep dives, we tend to run these like we do one of our development sessions or one of our forum sessions, where it's the content is mostly driven by what folks in the audience would like to talk about, the issues that they're facing, the things that we are currently working on, and kind of building a set of issues that we're going to be taking forward and addressing over the next several months. So we typically work from an Etherpad, which is a collaborative document. It's similar to Google Docs, but simpler. And the URL for it is right here. And once, pardon? That is a small K in Kubernetes. Yeah, it is case sensitive. The URLs in the Etherpad. I can erase that and make it a small K. Yeah, and that's where you'll be able to find the agenda. You'll be able to take notes. You'll be able to add to it, and it will be a working document for the coming months that we'll refer back to. So, to start off with, I think that there's actually some recent news and some things that happened this week that is going to have a pretty large impact across not just SIG OpenStack, but a number of other SIGs within the Kubernetes community. And as many of you know, there are a number of different cloud providers that are contained upstream within the Kubernetes repository. And so SIG OpenStack is one of these. The OpenStack provider, the AWS provider, the GCP provider. But a cloud controller manager, which is an interface between Kubernetes and the cloud provider, has been built out, and all of the providers are expected to re-implement the features of their upstream providers as an external cloud provider. And so within the all the providers are working on this right now. SIG OpenStack is one of the providers that's pretty far ahead of the game. We have a repository in cloud provider OpenStack hosted within the Kubernetes repository, and we have end-to-end testing in place. We're working on docs. We have a number of different drivers for we have a Flex and a CSI driver for Cinder in there. We also have a Keystone authentication and authorization driver. We'll probably be adding a Manila driver, a CSI Manila driver in there too, so that we'll be expanding our storage options for those people who want asynchronous storage. But as this has happened, a number of other providers who haven't been upstreamed, but are writing cloud controller manager providers, also would like to have Kubernetes repositories and would also like to participate in these activities. And typically, if you want to have all code within the Kubernetes org needs to be owned by a SIG, and this is going to lead to an explosion of SIGs related to cloud providers. So the proposal to prevent that proliferation and to have all of these SIGs that some may only have 1, 2, 3 members who are actively contributing to code. Instead, there's a proposal in the works right now to create a single SIG called SIG Cloud, or it might be called SIG Provider, that would encompass all of the providers. And then all of the individual SIGs themselves, so SIG OpenStack, SIG AWS, SIG GCP, would be wound down and would instead become working groups within SIG Cloud. And so, we're not, all of this is in progress. And it makes sense from a certain standpoint, because it's going to allow us to establish standards for what it means to be hosted within the Kubernetes repository. Within the Kubernetes namespace, we'll have minimum documentation requirements, minimum testing requirements, a requirement that the providers are kept up to date and maintained. And by and large, it's while it will make kind of the scope of SIG OpenStack smaller, it's going to make the scope of what all of the providers can do larger, and provide a more positive user experience. But it's something that if you have strong feelings about or opinions about, or you want to become involved in, make sure you watch the mailing lists. We'll be announcing it in the SIG OpenStack channel, within the mailing lists, and within the working group cloud provider Slack channel, as everything kind of unfolds. But this is all fairly new in the last few days, and nothing is set in stone. But I felt like it was something that was pretty important to talk about and make sure that we were transparent about with everybody within the organization. So are there any questions about that? Anybody? Okay. So, with that work item done, let me see, what time do we have until? 35 minutes, so 3:55? No, 4:15. So one of the items that we're looking for more help on is expanding on documentation. Not only for the cloud provider itself, where we need a getting started guide where there's a pull request in place already for the beginnings of that, but also for documentation of all the parameters that are used to drive the parameters and usage for the cloud provider, and additionally documentation on just like getting started and how to get involved with the SIG. So if there's anybody in the group who is interested in contributing to that work, we're accepting kind of volunteers for that, and if you want to sign up, you can add your name to the Etherpad.
Please help.
Yeah. Another work item that we're pretty heavily involved with right now, and unfortunately neither Dims nor Melvin were able to make it to KubeCon this time around. But they've done a tremendous amount of work in building out the test coverage of the provider and also the various drivers. Right now, there's active work on having the tests run for the CSI driver for Cinder, and this is being done in OpenLab. So if you aren't familiar with it, OpenLab is an independent organization that's devoted to testing free open source projects, particularly those related to cloud. And so that covers, OpenStack projects and Kubernetes. And so right now they're running testing for things like Terraform and Gopher Cloud. That's where the CI/CD is happening for those. But also for the SIG OpenStack is also taking advantage of their resources for testing. And so there's work that we need to do on that. So right now, every set of tests that run is reports back as an individual to GitHub, which means that if you're following any of these issues within the cloud provider, you wind up getting 8 emails for every pull request and every change to that pull request because the OpenLab reports back on each one of those. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is looking into doing a test consolidation where the tests are run as a batch job, similar to what happens in the OpenStack Garrett system, where all the tests are run, and then once every test is complete, then it's reported back as a batch to help reduce, to help improve the signal to noise ratio that's coming out of the tests. Any questions or thoughts on that? We may go through this pretty quickly.
Yeah, we'll get to the heart of
all right.
everybody else's concerns.
So another issue that we've faced within the SIG is kind of an issue of meetings. We have meetings every other week, and not very many people are showing up to them. And kind of from a show of hands, how many people know about the meetings here? I mean, are people aware that the meetings are happening? For those of you who have been attending or who aren't attending and how many would be interested in coming to the SIG OpenStack meetings and their typical Zoom meetings that are, like the community meeting? So what are the things that we would need to cover in those meetings to make them more useful for the participants, because I know that for us, it's a good way for us to catch up and get a sense of the things that we need to accomplish over the next few weeks, but we also want to make sure that we're meeting and addressing the needs of the community at large, and that you find the meetings useful also. And so does anyone have any suggestions on things that we can do to improve the visibility and also improve the utility of them for everybody? Okay, so one suggestion is you can't attend because it's in the middle of the night. So in the Etherpad, would it be possible for maybe people to put times that, maybe a range of times, either in UTC or with your time zone attached, so that we can reevaluate the meeting time, because it's fairly easy to change. It's just a pull request to the community repository, and because we would be happy to change the meeting time so that everyone else can attend. And it's difficult because we have a bunch of contributors from the Asia Pacific region. We also have contributors from Europe. So there may need to be a TikTok thing where we have an early meeting once a month and a late meeting once a month, so that we can get a little bit more coverage across all of the time zones.
Or, it's valid to say, too, that perhaps meetings aren't valuable and we would rather resolve things with issues. I think it's nice to have time to actually discuss things, but we could also do it on a need basis. If people are not really interested in attending it, we don't need to go through the motions just to go through the motions. But if it's valuable, we'd love to keep them going.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any comments about the meetings, or what they would like to see, or what they would find useful? Okay.
Another vote for European friendly time zone.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to reschedule so that we can capture more people.
Meetings are great with onboarding, right? You join a meeting and you hear what's going on, you get the topics, it's easy then to go to
Yeah.
and have context for what you're seeing as far as issues and what the focus is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. And now I guess to the Hart, you want to take over this?
This was more about this is more the open-ended part of the conversation, but this is kind of trying to figure out what are the people in the room interested in, what do they want to see out of, or what's missing, what are we having issues with the provider, those types of things. As we address, we think docs is already an issue, but if there's specific elements of the documentation that are lacking or obviously erred, if you had any feedback around that, it'd be nice to be able to target the work a little bit.
Right. And some of the obvious places where there are gaps include things like auto scaling, and I think auto scaling is a particularly difficult problem for OpenStack clouds. Typically, the way the community has looked at scaling based off of load or other conditions is to have some sort of time series database installed with a metrics API. But traditionally in OpenStack, the Cinder project has kind of broken up into smaller projects. It's not widely deployed, and so I think that if you build an auto scaling component into the OpenStack cloud provider, I don't think that you can necessarily rely on something like Heat auto scaling, because Heat may or may not be available, Cinder may or may not be available, or any of the other tooling for that. So does anybody have any experience in this, or have people come up with their own solutions for auto scaling in OpenStack, or auto scaling where there's not a direct metrics API that they can query to use as a trigger for this? Because if there's a general solution and it's a solution that we could implement as part of the provider, but is more generic and not necessarily dependent upon the APIs, I think that there's actually still a demand for it and people would like to see it.
Right, because in OpenStack, there's at least, there's Sinlin that's wanting to do as auto scaling. There's Heat, and then, but we can't guarantee any of those are going to be there. So we want to try and build a more bare bones approach, and it may come down to polling at some point to get enough information, but that's not a very attractive solution.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody has suggestions, I have an issue filed against the autoscaling repo to build it for OpenStack, and I'm in the process of experimenting with ways to go about that without requiring services that a lot of clouds may not have running. But no, go ahead.
Like, a lot of the metrics are already on Kubernetes, like the ones that you would require for the scaling. Do we really need the additional OpenStack components for it?
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
It's like the Kubernetes API already exposes a lot of the node information, so it's probably the best source for this use case.
Yeah, just take the Node API and integrate it with Nova to scale out and
Or
up and
just
down.
query Kubernetes about.
Yeah, like query Kubernetes and then use that as a trigger for the.
Yeah, no, we've experimented a bit with it. We didn't really implement anything, but all the information seems to be there. So
Really? Okay. Do you have code anywhere that you have?
it's mostly like scripts just to see if it will work. It's not really anything.
Okay.
But yeah,
So that handles scaling up. Do you have anything that handles scaling down, or you just assume that you're going to keep growing?
that's like a generic issue.
Yeah.
You won't solve I don't think that having another source will solve that issue. We'll always have that issue, whatever the metrics source is, I guess.
The question I have is who's responsible for scaling the Kubernetes side? I would have thought Kubernetes would be the one requesting more resources, and then would be the one giving them away again.
So I'm not fully familiar with how the auto scaling works within the CCM itself. There are interface. There are defined interfaces for this. The interfaces that we've implemented are the load balancer and storage interfaces. It's not.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's
Okay.
in Kubernetes auto scaling, and it's
Okay.
so you have to write part of the cloud. You have to write essentially a cloud provider portion
I
in
see.
that auto scaling repo as well, which is why the issues on that repo and
Oh, well, that shouldn't be. I mean, we can just model after what other providers are doing and make calls to Nova.
yeah, no, absolutely. The spinning up another VM is not the problem. It's the
How do they get
executing.
how do they get the credentials into the other providers? Where do they pull those from for configuration?
I don't know.
I don't
off the
know.
top of my head.
Does anyone know? Is anyone familiar with the auto scaling repository? Has anyone worked in that? Okay. I think that's something that we can.
Once
Work on.
once we get back, that's I'm hoping to make that one of my primary focuses moving forward. So, but again, any input and help is
Yeah.
welcomed, more than welcome.
Another issue is load balancing. So how many people are using the provider, either the in-tree or the out of tree provider? Are you using the load balancing on it? Okay. Just use it for Cinder. Okay, volume attachments. Yeah. How many people are you just using Cinder within the yeah? People who are using it are just using Cinder. Yeah. I mean, load balancing is one of those things that I don't know if there's anything that we can do about that. In just Neutron LBAS v2 has been deprecated, so it's not recommended to be used anymore, and it'll will be probably depending strictly on Octavia, but Octavia is not widely deployed, and it can be fairly resource intensive. And I know that for load balancing, if I were to use it, I would probably just grab one of the like the Nginx load balancers, and just add that. But I don't know if anyone has anything to add about the load balancing in the provider, if they have any experiences with it.
We are still using the old T2 load balancing with proxy on the networks.
Okay, is that working for you?
It's working, but we tell our customers it's
Tech preview.
but they use it. Their install was automatically recognized.
Okay. Do you have plans to upgrade off of Neutron LBAS v2?
Since 5 minutes, not anymore.
But I mean to Octavia. Do you have plans to move to Octavia? Yeah. Yeah. It has higher requirements because it wants Barbican for keys, and it brings up an entire VM, and so it's not using, it wants a whole VM to do your load balancing. So, there are lighter weight ways to do it, but so
It's the OpenStack way.
yeah.
And it's high available, and our current solution is not high available.
Yeah.
Still over by
Right. Okay. I don't know, GPU accelerator?
Yeah,
schedule?
so there's been, this is something I'm interested in as a work for a company that builds accelerators, obviously, but there's also been, from a few of the drive-bys in the meetings, interest in being able to schedule based on GPU and supporting that kind of scheduling pass-through. Just trying to determine if that's a wider interest or if that's a pretty specific interest. At least one nod in the room. Okay. That's probably a little bit further down the list as far as things that I can tackle, but I'm.
Yeah, there is an OpenStack project that's devoted to providing GPUs as a compute resource called Cyborg. It's still in early stages, and I'm not sure how that would integrate, but if it's something you're interested in OpenStack in general, that might be a good place to start looking, and then possibly seeing how that could be integrated inside of this.
We're also using like the basic Nova PCI packaging support.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We played with it also in Kubernetes.
Yeah. Is it working?
Yeah, well, with some caveats, but
Yeah, there's always caveats. What's your technique for managing that?
so we use flavors
Okay.
to be able to pass the actual properties and we use that inside
Now, how does the pod scheduling work with that? Because does a pod take over? Does it take complete control of a GPU? And so that how do the pods know that that's taken out of?
like the Kubernetes part, we just like pass the full device, so it has to be, we have to know what's running there. We can't just let it go.
Okay.
What's happening for now.
Yeah. Okay.
But like because of like advertising the GPU to a single VM,
Mm-hmm.
putting that available on the VM, it's not hard.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. I think there are lots of people who'd be happy to hear that. Do you have this code in a repository somewhere? Is it shareable?
We're using, so this works with Flink for the Nova stuff.
Uh-huh.
We had to patch this for the flavors. You had to patch the properties and the image.
Yeah.
That wasn't ideal, so we actually pushed the patch of Flink, so it's bigger.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Nova scheduler, there's what's the name of that service called? The placement. There's a placement service, and one of the things that you can do with the placement service is you can tag nodes you can tag nodes with resources, and then also tag flavors with those resources, and so the scheduler will only match the flavor with the tag to the node with the tag, which means that if you want to start up, if you want to only start up a virtual machine with a GPU, there's a way to do that which abstracts away a lot of it gives you a way to abstract your hardware details and to abstract away the flavors. So I think that it's a little bit more useful, and especially if you're doing bare metal, it's actually a really great way to segment all of your if you have a heterogeneous data center, it's a great way to segment it and make it easier, and not have to know like every single characteristic of every machine, which can be a bit of a pain to introspect. So that's it. That's
okay. And somebody added key management. I assume that's Barbican support.
Yeah. So who added that, and what's your use? Like, can you elaborate a bit more on key management support and what you're looking for in it?
Or was it remote?
It might have been remote. It might have been DIMS.
I didn't add it, but one thing we would like to have a way to integrate the Kubernetes secrets with the external stores, but I think that's more at the Kubernetes level, that this is not probable yet, from what I understand.
Okay.
But like having integration with external stores and integrate Barbican, so that might be.
Okay, so basically a way to access the Barbican key store and populate the secrets in Kubernetes.
Right.
Okay.
I don't think the support is there on Kubernetes.
No, I don't. Yeah. Not that I'm aware of, but there's a lot that I'm not aware of. What's that?
Tim says Barbican, because he did add that line.
Okay.
Talking about Barbican support.
Okay.
Yeah, so the last I checked, there's no support in Gopher Cloud for that. If that's something that's necessary, I can help with that.
Does everyone know what Gopher Cloud is? It's a Go SDK to interact with OpenStack clouds. It was developed at Rackspace. It was originally a Rackspace project. You can still find the old Gopher Cloud at the Rackspace Git repository, but there is it's Gopher Cloud in a Gopher Cloud namespace now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you go to GitHub, Gopher Cloud /Gopher Cloud, it's there. It's being developed and maintained by Joe. How do you say his name? Topjan?
I've only read it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And
person.
he's also he also is the author and maintainer of the Terraform provider for OpenStack. So if you like Terraform, that's also his work, and it's actually pretty good. If that's something that. So, and if Dims is online, we can ask him what he means by ingress. So. So does anyone know what we so ingress?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's me. Maybe he'll phantom type here in a minute.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything else anyone wanted to kind of talk about? Anything that you were interested in hearing, or things you're looking for? Yes. Yes. Yeah, there are. So within the cloud provider repository, there are 2 drivers for Cinder. One is a Flex driver, and the other is a CSI driver. Both are maintained. Both came out of experimental work that was being done in SIG storage. And this is kind of the new home for them. And actually, some of the original authors of that have approached us and said, "Oh, we want to come back involved with this again." So, DIMS has been working on getting testing in place, so that so that we can be sure it works and it's tested. But it's actually Cinder as an external storage solution has been available for over a year now. Yeah, so, and the repository is Kubernetes / cloud provider, cloud-provider -OpenStack. Yeah.
This was the pointer for ingress. So
Okay.
More activity support.
Oh yeah, so there's a document that's missing. Okay, so it looks like we
it's
need
in
to
pro-
document it.
Looks like it's in progress.
Yeah. Okay, final 2 minutes. Is there anything else that anyone? Oh yeah. Yes. So that is CERN is working on that. They have an implementation.
Yeah, we have the implementation of the CSI driver for separate
Uh-huh.
and we are working on the Manila integration also. But like, because I understood that there will be a change in the way this is done. Like we are working on the external provisioner. I was wondering if anyone else has played with this. Yeah, we are looking at it as well. But it's not really secure for public cloud side and okay. We're waiting for the piece of implementation. So then it's happened by the media. So you want to use like NFX and dump directly. Yeah, you don't want to talk directly to the separate mechanism. And then NFX is a piece of hypertext. It's going to be implemented in yeah, we have public cloud and we cannot trust all our customers.
Yeah. Was that you that brought it up in the Slack channel earlier today? Someone else brought it up and said that they have a driver that they want to contribute to the repository. So we're going to take that submission at, pretty much sometime in the next few weeks. It's going to start rolling in, and we'll have that there. So if you want to take a look at it and contribute to it, with your experiences and your experiences on working on it, but that'll be available soon.
So the separate class, the code is there now, also supported Q. Yeah, it's very experimental. Yeah, so it was merged like last week. Yeah, I tried to do it.
Okay. Well, I think we're at time. Thanks everybody for coming. If you have any more questions, we'll be here afterwards. And SIG OpenStack channel, everybody's welcome. If you want to contribute, we have the owner's file set up, and you can email us, and we can get you hooked up if you want to start reviewing code and contributing back. So thanks everybody for coming, and
Thank you.
hopefully we'll see you at the summit.